fighting for equal justice.
They need to start listening to us. They need to stop killing us because of our skin color.
Millions of people across the country and here on the island demanding change.
The police are not held accountable to the people they're meant to be protecting.
And pushing for transparency and accountability from the police who swore to serve and protect us.
We want the community to trust us, and we're going to be an open book and show that trust.
As police work to build that trust.
Justice is what has to prevail.
Hope for justice for all. Good evening and thanks for joining us for our special Justice for All show. You know, in the years since George Floyd's murder at the hands of a police officer, there has been a nationwide reckoning over racial injustices here in the U.S., leading to months of protests, rallies, and demonstrations demanding change. Here in New York, Governor Cuomo ordered the state's more than 500 police departments to develop reform plans. Our Eileen LaPalmer tells us what happens now that those plans have been approved.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
It's now been a year of meetings and protests calling for police reform, many charged with raw emotions.
Leave us alone! We are just people!
It's all led up to now. Back on April 1st, nearly 500 law enforcement agencies in New York notified the state that their police reform plans were approved by their local legislative bodies.
Police reform plan passes by a vote of 16-3.
So now what? With nearly 500 plans submitted, is anyone actually reviewing them? Think about it. If you printed it out, it'd be tens of thousands of pages, hours and hours of reading. As of the end of May, state officials tell me the Division of the Budget has received more than 490 police reform plans, but that 9 are still outstanding. The Attorney General does have the power to appoint an independent monitor to oversee police departments that didn't comply with the executive order. I recently asked the Attorney General about it.
I'm just curious if your office has assigned a monitor yet to look into any individual police departments who did not comply with that order.
So at this point, our Civil Rights Bureau is looking into those reform recommendations. And at this point in time, I cannot comment on whether or not we are looking at any particular jurisdiction or municipality in the state of New York.
For the departments who met the deadline, they did so with guidance from the governor's executive order.
Policies and procedures on the use of force, mental health, crowd control, that's all in there.
It included a nearly 150-page workbook with core goals that had to be included in all police reform plans. Nassau and Suffolk say they went above and beyond that and are already implementing changes.
We were told no longer can you use a chokehold. We never taught the chokehold in the Nassau County Police Department. We teach a carotid restraint. We no longer teach that either. The way we collect our data, totally transparent in data. Every 6 months, all of our data will be, with the demographics, will be posted online for everybody to see.
I feel like we are really shifting the paradigm as a department to make it a problem-oriented policing model. So maybe we don't just look at arrests and summonses when we're looking to promote somebody. Maybe we now look at, are you engaging with the community?
Now that the police reform plans passed, local municipalities are clear to get the state aid that the governor had threatened to withhold if there was no change. But there is no deadline for when the reforms in the approved plans actually have to be put in place.
There's certain things that you can start right away, and there's others that are associated with collective bargaining.
But Vanessa Baird-Streeter, the co-chair of Suffolk's Police Reform Task Force, makes this promise.
We'll keep our task force together for implementation of the plan.
Police reform activists like Shaniqua Levin say they will be watching and calling out politicians who don't keep their promises.
Do they really feel that Black Lives Matter, or was it just a trendy thing for our elected officials to do as well?
Levin and others abruptly broke with Nassau's police advisory panels earlier this year and created this independent document known as the People's Plan. They've also submitted that to the governor's office.
But advocates who support the People's Plan say April 1st was just one part of this equation, just one deadline, and that there's 2 other elements of reform that they're going to continue working on.
Look at the police budget, see where there's overspending or where we don't need armed officers to do certain tasks, taking that money, investing into some of the proposals, into the People's Plan, and reinvesting into the communities.
And only time will tell how it plays out from here. I'm Eileen LaPalmer, News 12, Long Island.
Body cameras can provide vital information about interactions between the police and the public that they're sworn to protect. But only a handful of officers here on the island are actually equipped with a camera. As News 12 has reported, there are currently no body cams at all in Nassau Police Department. But just last month, the county legislature improved an agreement with the police union that authorizes a $3,000 a year payment to each officer who's issued a camera. A pilot program is expected to begin in 2 precincts in September. Police reform advocates say it's a move towards accountability and transparency, but a financial burden to taxpayers.
Taking basically money out of the hands and out of the mouths of taxpayers and giving it to the police to simply do their job and wear a piece of equipment that should be just par with the course for 2021.
In Suffolk, a handful of officers wear body cameras. The county says it still has not chosen a vendor or reached a deal with the police union.
It is just an issue of ensuring that we get the right apparatus and we can negotiate the correct amount that's associated with wearing the body cameras.
Suffolk pledged the body camera program will begin to roll out in October. Well, New York's top prosecutor is proposing major reforms to the state's police use of force laws. State Attorney General Letitia James says officers are just too quick to use deadly force in situations that don't call for it. She's proposing alternative methods such as giving a warning, de-escalation, or communicating with a suspect. Many people we spoke with today say police use of deadly force should only be a last resort.
Not all cops are bad. We've got a lot more good cops than we have bad cops, but we definitely need to weed out the bad cops.
A police union scoffed at the proposal, saying the AG is pushing a, quote, false narrative and arguing that the measure would force officers to avoid confrontations where force might become necessary. It could create meaningful checks on police officers in both Nassau and Suffolk, but both failed to create a civilian complaint review board in their reform plans. And as Artema Ponton explains, advocates say an independent CCRB is desperately needed.
I was scared because this shouldn't happen at all. This shouldn't happen to anybody. These are the people that are supposed to be looking out for you and protecting you.
Brian Garcia of Comac says he was illegally stopped and strip searched by Suffolk police back in May of 2016.
What they did to me on the side of the parkway, for people to see that too, was not only embarrassing, but it was traumatic in my eyes.
Garcia says while driving from Comac to Babylon, he was pulled over as he turned onto the Sunken Meadow Parkway.
It went from normal to dramatically terrible within 5 minutes of my pullover.
He says he handed over his license, registration, and 2 PBA cards from his father and brother, a retired NYPD detective and an officer with the Port Authority.
I was asking them if I was getting detained for anything, and they refused to answer me. The first thing they saw when they were flashing their lights in my car was my tattoos.
Garcia, who only had finger tattoos when he was stopped, says he was racially profiled.
They said to me, "Are you MS Chico?" And in my mind, I'm Puerto Rican. To hear that, in my head, I was like, wow, that's racist.
He says he was handcuffed and made to strip on the side of the parkway in full view of cars passing by.
The officers standing there, pulling my boxer briefs open and all shining flashlights down there. Like, what? I don't know where they expect me to put this stuff, but it just, they just didn't find anything, and this was all for nothing.
Garcia says he filed a police report and a complaint 2 days after the stop.
At the end of it, they told me not to lawyer up. And I thought that was a little weird, that they were going to look into it and get back in touch with me, which I never heard from them again.
This is a story that was heard over and over and over again by people of color, by people who are mistreated based on the last name that they have, the color of their skin.
Hempstead-based attorney Fred Brewington filed a civil lawsuit for tens of millions of dollars against Suffolk County, the police department, 2 police officers, and 3 detectives for multiple violations of Garcia's civil rights.
No police reports immediately made about this stuff. No records maintained about how this man was treated. A complete denial that he was strip searched on the side of a major highway.
This type of alleged incident is why Brewington says Nassau and Suffolk need a civilian complaint review board. But as News 12 has reported, neither police department included a CCRB in reform plans, despite calls to do so by community leaders and members of groups that continue to demand sweeping police reform.
A civilian complaint board, truly separate and apart from the police system, is necessary.
Right now, the police's idea of oversight is one of their own, looking over and rubber stamping things. The police policing themselves is not acceptable.
A civilian complaint review board would allow an independent body that doesn't have the ties to the police department.
New York City does have a CCRB, and according to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, the cities of Schenectady and Albany also have civilian and community review boards. Brewington believes a CCRB in Suffolk might have helped Garcia.
There is no accountability here. Not one of these officers, as far as I know, ever suffered any repercussions for treating a citizen the way that they treated this young man. And that's a problem. And that's a problem that continues to exist within our system.
Brian Garcia says he hopes that the lawsuit will result in accountability.
I respect their job and what they do for a living, but what they did to me, abusing their power and bullying me the way they did it, just, I hope they don't do that to anybody ever again.
I'm Tama Paulton, News 12, Long Island.
Suffolk police wouldn't comment on Mr. Garcia's lawsuit, citing the pending litigation. Meantime, the county's police reform plan creates a civilian oversight review process that will be managed by the Suffolk's Human Rights Commission. In Nassau, the police commissioner has previously said the oversight already in place, including internal affairs, is sufficient. Qualified immunity. So what is it, and why is it a hot-button issue in bipartisan police reform negotiations on Capitol Hill? Plus,
I think the more information we can exchange, the more problems we can solve.
We're hitting the streets with some police officers working to build trust in the community. That's coming up after the break. Federal police reform measures are being debated in Washington, and one of the major sticking points in bipartisan negotiations is ending or putting limits on what's known as qualified immunity. The controversial law effectively protects police officers from personal liability for acts committed in the line of duty. Right now, 4 states and New York City have newly passed laws that limit or end qualified immunity. PBA officials say ending the protection could make police officers afraid to carry out their sworn duties.
If you're going to sit there and pause for a second, you're going to put yourself in a position that you might get killed, or the victim that you're protecting, another police officer. And I'm sorry, we're the good guys. We come there to help out. As much as the world's saying right now that we're this, that, and the other thing, we're there to help out.
But a human rights attorney that we spoke with says the measure has to go.
No other place in this country or in this state or in this county is somebody allowed to violate somebody else's rights and then be protected and cloaked with a shield of immunity. It just doesn't happen. And that's the problem.
Qualified immunity can only be fully abolished by Congress or the Supreme Court. Well, back here on the island, police are taking to the streets to develop a stronger bond with residents in minority communities. The Nassau Police Department sending out more cops on bikes, as well as additional problem-oriented police, or POP officers. The deputy commanding officer of Nassau's 1st Precinct says establishing relationships is key.
I think the more information we can exchange, the more problems we can solve.
Residents say change can start with a conversation.
They're being more approachable with the community. They're having more meetings with us, something that probably wasn't done as much.
Nassau is also expanding its PALS program in Roosevelt, Elmont, and Lawrence, where they say more can be done to build trust with young people. The department's new academy is almost complete. Our Antoinette Biordi got an exclusive look inside the facility. Officials say they will not only train the next generation of officers, but will hopefully foster a stronger relationship with the community.
It's been decades in the making. For nearly 30 years, the Nassau County Police Department has not had a training facility to call its own. In May of 2019, News 12 was there as the county broke ground on the new state-of-the-art $54 million police academy.
On the grounds of a school that will partner with us to bring those diverse children into our system so that they can learn how the police department is on their side.
Fast forward 2 years later, the facility on the campus of Nassau Community College in Garden City is almost complete. In January, I got an exclusive look inside.
So we're getting the first look at the new academy.
In June, we were invited back, and there has been progress. Classrooms are starting to take shape, and a new basketball court complete.
Commissioner Patrick Ryder says this is not just an intelligence and training center. This building is supposed to be for the community, so they can better understand the people they serve.
This new academy, not only will it train our police officers better, this whole first floor is dedicated to community.
Officials say the 90,000 square foot building will concentrate on community engagement, a practice they're already putting to good use. Earlier this month, the new basketball court was used for the first JoJo Wright Invitational in memory of a 15-year-old Uniondale High School athlete killed in a crash in January.
It still hurts he's not here, but it's a little bit of comfort knowing that, he's still loved and he was loved so much.
It's events like this that police brass hope will create a tighter bond between their officers and the communities they've sworn to protect and serve.
If you understand the culture you police, the area you police it better. And that's the key to what we're trying to teach here in this new building.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office.
2 weeks ago, 161 new Nassau County police recruits were sworn in inside the new facility.
This has been my dream job since I was a little girl, so finally happening is very exciting.
Finally, I feel like I achieved my dream to become a Nassau County police officer.
Police and county officials say this is actually the most diverse group of recruits they've had in years. But only 13% of the officers in training are minorities.
I think we are making strides. We are not done yet. There is a lot more work left to do.
Out of 161 recruits, a majority of them, 139, are white. 4 are black, 12 are Hispanic, and 5 are Asian.
I feel like there is diversity in the police department. I feel like there can always be more.
The department has recently come under fire for its lack of diversity by a civil rights group. Nassau County Executive Laura Curran recently created the Nassau County Police Diversity Committee to look at ways to recruit more people of color and to help them with training, studying for the exam, and mentoring.
We have a lot of work to do in diversity. We know that. We're trying.
This as the department is hoping to recruit and train more men and women of color in this academy, so the force will mirror the communities they patrol. Antoinette Biordi, News 12, Long Island.
The new academy is expected to have an official grand opening to welcome the public in September. All right, after the break, what's next in the road to police reform here on the island? And
to not have to think that my life is in jeopardy when I am pulled over.
The men of Elmont sitting down with the Nassau Police Commissioner and other members of the force to discuss everything from mental health and the Black Lives Matter movement. Welcome back to our special program, Justice for All. It's now been a year of meeting and protests. So now the police departments across the state and here on the island have submitted reform plans. What happens next? The state's division of the budget received 493 police reform plans. 11 are still outstanding. The state attorney general tells News 12 her Civil Rights Bureau is looking into the reform recommendations. There's currently no hard deadline for police departments to implement the reform plans they submitted. Meantime, the so-called People's Plan was also submitted to the state. It was developed by 3 community-led coalitions with the input of hundreds of Long Islanders. The plan includes 12 proposals for structural reform. They would reimagine policing and public safety to ensure that Nassau and Suffolk are safe for all Long Islanders. Well, local high school students also working to implement change here on the island.
For far too long, we asked you to see us. See us in a positive light, not a negative one.
We introduced you to the men of Elmont back in April. The group is made up of seniors at Elmont Memorial High School. They shared their powerful and emotional encounters with police in a video posted to YouTube.
These are people who are supposed to protect and serve and really be those heroes within our community, people we should look up to, but yet many of us have to live in fear. Many of us are scared to interact with them or be pulled over by them.
That video was added to the bias training for the newest class of Nassau's police recruits. And now Nassau's police commissioner is sitting down with the Elmont teens for a frank conversation about policing in the county. We'll have that story next Wednesday on the news at 10. Thanks for joining us for our special Justice for All. I'm Ian Page. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.